Rebel religion in the news.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Rebel Religion in the News. Jerry O'Lennon, along with my co-host Alfredo Romero of Rock of Life Fellowship, and our regular guest on Wednesdays is Bishop Peter Hansen of St. Augustine Anglican Church in downtown Chico. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I was fascinated by certain news stories really interest me, and this one that involving the 200 Venezuelans who the gang members who were deported from the United States to a super max prison in El Salvador, even as a U.S. judge blocked the removals. And so there's whole questions about whether or not the plane that was sending them out of the United States should have been turned around because a judge ordered it to come back. And it seems as though perhaps either they didn't get the message or they got the message, the pilot got the message, and it was just sort of ignored. But anyway, the bottom line is that these people are now in a very supermax, I would say brutal prison, something that is not even is worse than what you would see in Shawshank Redemption. Okay, if you've seen that movie, like everybody in the world has seen it. Mm-hmm. And so they're MS-13 gang members, let's make it clear. They're murderers, they're rapists, they're child abusers. These are the worst scum of the scum on earth. And I could say that and not feel like I'm being biased. Everybody seems to agree that these are just awful people. Those on the right, those in the center, those on the left. These are bad, bad people. So, but still, as I watched on CNN, had an incredible report showing the conditions of the prison. I found myself, nevertheless, feeling some sort of compassion for these individuals who are being dragged in there in chains, crouched down, having their heads shaven, and just thrown into this cage of other people. And I found myself actually having some compassion for them. Is my compassion misplaced?
Well, I think it speaks well of you, Jerry. Seriously,
Okay.
that you don't just say garbage, grind them up, kill them, machine gun them, machete. Sure, yeah, and that's not happening. But
Right.
Prison is not cruel especially somebody who's been so described and apparently very accurately as the worst of the worst of the worst criminals in this world, who came here with no good intention.
Mm-hmm.
They crossed our borders illegally. Now remember that they're not ours.
Mm-hmm.
They don't belong to us. They're not our problem. They shouldn't be. They were given to us as a foolish attempt at increasing the workforce here in America, and let anybody and everybody across. And they saw that opportunity. And they came and they took over apartment blocks and terrorized the people here. They brought their hell that other people were escaping from here to share with us. No, thank you. I mean, do we have a right to exclude them from our society? Very true, we do.
Is there such a place where somebody used the term hell on earth? And when I saw the prison conditions that I saw in the CNN special report, I thought, if there is a hell on earth, this would be one of them. This particular prison would be a hell on earth. Is it possible to have a hell on earth? I mean, is hell anything like? I mean, we don't. We hopefully we never find out.
Right.
But is that possible that the conditions could be so bad, like I think these prisoners are facing? I'm not saying it's not deserved. I'm just saying, is it possible to have something that brutal here on Earth?
I would say, it approximates it. It sketches out the scenario. Is that a bad message to give to somebody who's been living and dishing out hell themselves to anybody around them?
Right.
Is it not just as retribution, but maybe as a life lesson that will turn them? Who knows? But that they may turn at the end and cry out to God. The worst things that can happen to somebody can be the best thing that happens to somebody who won't turn at any other point in time.
Yeah.
I was about to ask, is there a point where you give up on a hope of redemption, where somebody is so low? And I remember I was talking to Pastor Pastor Alfredo before the show, and you had suggested that there reaches a point where God just says, that's it, no hope,
There is.
I'm done.
There is that. Of course, it's biblically.
Uh-huh.
There's a sin for which there's no redemption. Jesus describes it as the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. In Hebrews, there's a couple of places where there's a crossing the line. That's not something you do accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just say, gee, damn it, and then all of a sudden you're going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
You messed up. You ever notice, though, interestingly enough, there are swear words about the Father or God in general. There are swear words about Jesus. We don't have any swear words about the Holy Spirit.
Right.
There are none. Curiously, and you feel a little inhibited to even suggest that that should be so.
Right.
But there are people who are so evil that God has definitely said, "All right, the chances are all over. You've blown all of your chances."
So
I'll give you an example of that.
Go ahead.
Ayatollah Khomeini was the conqueror of Iran in the Iranian Revolution, and he headed up a reign of terror that murdered hundreds of thousands of people, genocide, and against Christians and against Jews and against Kurds and all of these people. He was a very evil, vicious man. Had a look about him like he was smelling a bad smell all the time. He's like a Hitler.
Yeah.
Okay. And my wife, at the time of the Iranian Revolution, she'd just become a Christian. And she wanted to pray for all of the Muslims to turn, especially for her native land of Iran. And then she went to pray for Ayatollah, if that would be, what if he could be turned into a Christian? Wouldn't that be a wonderful outcome? And she went to pray for him, and she felt the Holy Spirit put his hand over her mouth and said, "Don't you do it.
Wow.
Don't you pray that." And she tried to do it several times, and he was just very gentle about it, but firm. Don't do that. Now, that would be an extraordinary, you'd think that's personal or whatever. But then she heard a story from her father who had been reading, he read all the news. And he read of a bunch of Christian ministers who went to Cyprus, where in the Middle East they usually find it safe to go to Cyprus and meet as Christians. And in a circle they said, we should probably pray for Ayatollah Khomeini, and maybe his heart will turn. And they went to pray for him. And the Holy Spirit put his hand over all of their mouths and said, "Don't you do it."
Wow.
Yeah, there's a couple things. Carolyn Levitt, she's the press secretary, had stated that the reason why that plane didn't turn around because the court order from that judge came after, and there was a debate whether it was a verbal order or a written order. But they were already in international waters. They are already in international waters, so they weren't going to turn back. Now, what you had said, Bishop, is that it's reprobate according to the Bible. I won't go into the long, deep definition of it. But reprobate bases a person so morally corrupt, incapable of discerning good from evil, and has rejected God's truth time and time again. And God knows us. He knows what's going to happen. He knows who is going to receive Christ, who is not. And there are people, and it states this in Jeremiah, in Romans 1:28, in 2 Corinthians 13:5, and in Hebrews, it talks about the ones that the Lord has just let go and given themselves to their own depravity because they do not see fit, this is Romans 1:28, they do not see fit to acknowledge God who gave them up to their depraved mind to do what ought not to be done. So if God knows, this is the big question for me, then what do you do with those people here on earth? If they're murderers and child molesters and child killers and thieves, the worst of the worst, the demonic, and that's the whole thing. It's a spiritual battle, people. Don't remember that. Don't forget that. Remember that. And what do you do with these sincerely evil people? You got to put them somewhere because, just like the bishop said, you can't let them run loose in society.
But does that mean we give up hope that they can't be redeemed?
It's not our job.
That's
That's not our job, that we're going to judge them to hell or heaven.
Okay.
We put them in God's hands. But, the Old Testament justice, which is all, eye for an eye, hand for a hand, and all that, was enacted in that circumstance on the desert because they were under martial law. They had to survive by being on God's side all the time, and if anything went wrong with somebody like this, they just executed them always. Now, that was because they didn't have jails. They were wandering. They don't have a permanent settlement. They're going to have to do away with their miscreants. We have different questions to answer, but I mean, that was the choice at that point. They just would stone them to death.
Yeah, I just read Exodus the other day, and I read it. I read that, and that's exactly what they had to
Even
do.
bad teenagers got stoned to death. You know that.
Yeah.
Now, that was the law. I don't know if I ever heard it actually being enacted,
Yeah.
but it would be a good deterrent. You know, there's been no deterrent for these guys up
Yeah.
to now.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't want to sound like a bleeding heart because I'm not. Maybe I am a
Yeah,
little
you're an
bit.
old soul.
You're
Well,
remaining
I'm a little
neutral.
bit-
You're
I'm
moderating.
trying- I'm-
That's
I am.
fine.
There's a softness here, and of course, if it was one of my family members, I would say
Off
send
with
them
their
in, send
heads.
them in there and throw away the key, and make them suffer as much as possible. So I certainly am not oblivious to that.
Right.
But I would still, despite the fact, if somebody did something to harm my family, I would want them to suffer. But for some reason, I still feel like I would want them to find Christ
Sure.
in some way or another. And I don't know whether or not a prison like we see in El Salvador is going to provide that type of possibility, unless there's something that in the CNN report does not show, which maybe there are church
A little
services
skewed.
that maybe the CNN report didn't give the and I got to be honest, CNN did a very good report on this, on what the prison conditions were like. It was a very well done report, very deep, but it didn't go into whether or not there are, the only thing they said is that for 30 minutes a day they're allowed to get out of their cages and do stretching exercises.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the level of, and then their food is handed to them through the cage, and they're all tattooed up, and it does look like a vision of hell.
Yeah.
It does. And so I don't know where I'm going here, other than to say that I still
Yeah,
hope that
compassion
there's
move, Jack.
there's got to be some hope as long as they're on Earth, and I hope that the prison system there decides to say, let's try to provide some sort of hope for them. Maybe we just didn't see it in the CNN report. I
What
don't
my
know.
compassion is with these people isn't for them now. It's what they could have been. My compassion is like, I'm sure when they were little children, this was what they were planning to be when they were older.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. We'll continue our discussion on rebel religion in the news.
Hey, welcome back to Rebel Religion in the News. We just finished talking about something that's pretty difficult, and that's people that may have just given up completely on God and ended up, in a really bad place, the prisoners down in El Salvador. But here's the other thing. I just did a sermon on Sunday about the good news that's happening in the world. So we don't want to focus completely on everything that seems like hopeless. But because there is really good things that God is doing always, every day, every single day in our lives. But you can't help but watch what's going on in Gaza. The ceasefire was broken. Israel had given them a demand, Hamas, and to release the hostages, and they didn't. So they stopped the ceasefire and went back to bombing. And that's difficult because you want peace in that area.
And in the process, dozens of young children are killed.
As
reported
reported by
yes.
the people that were bombed, and I just
Right.
heard that this morning. Who knows
Yes.
what the real truth is?
Right.
Anyway,
Right. And every time Israel has an aggression against them, they also pre-warn them. Get the kids and the women out of there because we're coming. They don't surprise. It's not a surprise attack like the October 7th was, and directed at women and children. I mean, they try to paint this thing about the Israelis going after kids. They don't want to kill their kids. I mean, Golda Meir, great line from decades and decades ago. She was the prime minister. She said, there's one thing I can't forgive the Palestinians for. I can forgive them for killing our children, but I can't forgive them for making us kill their children.
Yeah.
And I only wish that they would love their children more than they hate us. It's just chilling.
Yeah.
But
How do you?
they're putting their kids up as human shields and then blaming us for what
well, they
they're
put
doing.
their headquarters in hospitals, in schools, and underneath in
right.
tunnels, sometimes on purpose.
Right.
Well, how do you beat an opponent like this? It just doesn't care about their own civilians. I mean, and one of the questions I have, and I looked it up, I couldn't find anything, and maybe you have better luck than I do. I look at it like like when I was a kid, you used to have play with little army men. I don't know if you remember. You ever used to do
The
that.
little green army
green
man
army
about
guys.
an inch, 2 inches high.
And you would have little red ones and
Right.
orange ones.
Little
and-
tanks and
Oh yeah. And so I try to picture from up high how many Hamas people are out there that need to be, for lack of a better word, exterminated, removed from the planet, so that there could be some peace there. Or do we even know how big that Hamas army is?
I remember Jim Dobson once went to Israel. This is decades ago, also, but he said he went to Israel. He visited Jews. He visited Palestinians, and he said these are all very intelligent people. They are all very adroit. They know how to speak about world events, and they're all very clear and intelligent. And everything they get makes some sense, until you talk about the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Now all of a sudden everybody is like crazy. It's like intensely, horribly personal, and it is personal. Everybody there has, from both sides, have lost relatives, and are so programmed, if you will, that they have lost sight of any way across this divide, and they're never going to get it. So you got the Palestinians who've been raised up to chant, from the river to the sea.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, and to believe it, and that this is the only way for peace, and the Jews do everything wrong, and you hear that from the people who are chanting that here now, and yet, if we can stand in a neutral place and look at the activities of both sides, I got to say that Israel is justified in continuing a war thing, because it is not a ceasefire from the other side.
So this whole idea of President Trump wanting some sort of, Gaza beach resort is funny, because there's zero chance of there actually being peace in that area. This conflict has gone on since 1950.
Earlier than that.
47.
47 when Israel became a state.
Yeah.
And so that's been going on for nearly 80 years.
All my life.
All my life. So so what makes us think this is going to change? It's never going to change, is it?
I hope it can. I hope that there's enough of a Palestinian population left, if they actually get to the last Hamas soldier or ideologue, and do something to stop him from his aggression. But it's like a pale of scorpions. They negotiate with that.
Do you see progress in terms of what's happening in the United States, even at our colleges, for example, Columbia? I always like when somebody challenges these protesters, and they'll go from the river to the sea, and they ask them, so
Which river?
Which river and what sea? And they're like,
I know. I
that's
love
a
it.
trick question. It's
Or
like-
you even say some of the questions I've seen were, so just exactly what has the Israelis done that you prefer them to be completely wiped off the map?
Yeah.
And they'll give you all different answers. They were very jargled. They was very jumbled. And they were going, well, they took our land. It's the biggest thing. But okay, what land was that? And who had it first? And if you look at a map of Israel, let's say, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, 50 years ago, it's quite large.
Mhm.
And the land that they've given up now, they're this tiny little sliver of what they used to be, as if they've never given up land.
Yeah.
So, but the goal of Hamas and Palestinians and of course, pretty much everybody else, Iran, they want them gone, completely just wiped out.
Israel has offered up every kind of land deal, separation deal. Take this part, take that part.
Yep.
But the condition is you let us live here. We're able to remain in what is left of Israel. And they every single time refuse. They will not make peace. They will make war. They will insist that you leave the entire Middle East.
Do you think, like I do, that there has been progress, at least, excuse me, in the United States in terms of trying to get better educated about this? I mean, I mocked some of the other people who are protesting and don't know that it's the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. I understand, so I laughed at them, but
You pretty much ask that question to almost anybody.
yeah, they
know.
generally don't know. But I do think that people are trying. I think there seems to be an effort for the pro-Israeli side to at least try to educate people about what's really going on there. I'm just wondering, do you think it's starting to make some sort of difference here in the United States?
I will certainly. I think when universities have sponsored almost these kinds of anti-Israel events, have not protected their students from being harassed while going to class, and
Yeah.
when they have taken a position like in that Senate or that House interview, those three presidents, what is your position on this? And we don't have it,
Yeah.
they
Well, it's
all
conditional. Yeah.
conditional. Yeah, do you think this is genocidal? Are you against genocide? Well,
Depends on how you
what
interpret it. Yeah.
Excuse me, done. You're fired.
Yeah.
There's nothing left, and there have been some reciprocal actions.
Yeah.
Right. I've noticed that too.
Yeah, all I know is that whatever happens, we mentioned this at another show once, whatever happens, God is not surprised by anything. God's not sitting down there going, wow, the Trump Gaza, I never thought about that. The Riviera of the Middle East, that's a great idea.
The Gaza Plaza.
The Gaza Plaza. I never thought about. Well, that's a good idea. I always thought I always thought two state answer would be great. But no, God's not surprised into this. God's will not be undone. Whatever happens is God ordained. He has control. It's going to be okay. By the way, for those people that don't know, and I had to remember myself, it's the River Jordan in the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, is that what I said? I think that's what
Yes,
I
you
said.
Yeah,
did.
that's what you
I
said.
did, okay.
But I was trying to think because I was thinking, well, what was that? Oh, that's right. I had to bring that up too. But this whole thing is that, like I said before, God is not surprised by any of this. Whatever unfolds, God already knows what's going to happen. He's in complete control. He's not taken by surprise.
Does he care more about that region because it was the first region? The Garden of Eden was somewhere in that area. Does he care more about that region than he does about Chico, California, or Oroville, or Los Angeles?
I don't think you can talk about it in those terms because he cares about people.
Yeah.
Locations are important to him because they're significant and they're symbolic. But in the end, the whole world is going to be destroyed. So that doesn't mean
The point is moot.
it's going to be recreated.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the Garden of Eden believed to be Iraq? Parts of
Somewhere
Iraq?
more where the Tigris and Euphrates
Tigris, yeah,
flow
Tigris,
out of.
Euphrates, yeah.
Well,
somewhere.
there's supposed to be like three
Fertile
rivers
Crescent.
that connect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Fertile Crescent, yeah.
So north of Israel today.
We have about a minute left of the show. I want to talk real briefly for what's going on over at St. Augustine Anglican Church with Bishop Peter Hansen. I know we're in the Lent season. What should people be doing here over from now until Easter Sunday besides not eating chocolate?
Go to church. Yeah, well,
Church.
and on
the beach.
on Sunday mornings, of course, Sundays are feast days, whether it's Lent or not. So you can eat, in other words, or your disciplines for Lent are relieved for that one day a week.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, but we keep it a little austere, But we have, austere means we have a soup, salad, and bread, little mini luncheon at the end of the service, about 11:30, and it's wonderful. It's Lenten fare, but it's wonderful, and everybody shares in that.
And the service time is 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. On the 30th of this month, March, we're going to have the thaw, which is always right after the spring equinox. We have a chili cook-off, so come to that at 11:30. But 2:30 on the 30th, we're also having a concert of music. We've been having these concerts where Dr. Brad Martin brings his wonderful keyboard skills. He's our organist, along with professional and amateur instruments, string, woodwinds, and piano. The 30th at 2:30 in the afternoon, free concert. Come, Beethoven and Mozart.
On the podcast, we have all the information on the podcast. Real quickly, what's the web address?
STAugustineChico.com.
STAugustineChico.com to find out more about. If you're listening on the radio, it's on the screen if you're watching our podcast. Thank you so much, Bishop, and thank you so much, Pastor Alfredo. We're out of time. So long, everybody.
Bye.
Rebel religion